Hello and welcome to Varn Vlog, and we are live. We're not solo, although I had promised that earlier. I decided to ask longtime friend of the show and often person who says such outrageous stuff that I can't publish it on the main feed, Djene Bajalan, to the show.
Greetings, Varnanauts, as I think that's a good name for you guys. Varnanauts, Varnites, Varnists. Greetings, everybody, on this beautiful Liberation Day after.
Day after. So we are in the aftermath of people declaring. I mean, Jacobin today released a headline about the end of neoliberalism. It made me want to throw up in my mouth because there's nothing non-neoliberal about what Trump is doing. It's neoliberalism with mercantile characteristics as opposed to with international globalism characteristics.
Yeah, I mean this is one of the big things. Like people are proclaiming the death of neoliberalism, whereas at the same time we're seeing like an absolute privatization and decimation of the public sector in the United States, which strikes me as being one of the core characteristics of neoliberalism. But I will grant it to people, this tariff stuff is wild, right? You know, that's speaks to the incoherence of this policy. But yeah, so we're getting like the worst of both worlds.
Yeah, I mean, post neoliberalism is mercantilist tariffs with all the public-private partnerships of the 1980s. Which is not what anyone was promised, by the way. Like, even in Project 2025. Go ahead.
We get an austerity economy, but we don't get cheap flat screen TVs to offset the shittiness of having that economy, right?
Yep. So all your cheap luxury goods that have made boomers yell at you because they don't understand how much cheaper they were now than they are historically are no longer going to be cheap, and everything remains super expensive. And what gets me about this is when I hear people tell me about the Mar-a-Lago Accords. The theory about this is incoherent because starting trade wars does not equal a good environment to invest in massive production in the United States, nor does automation mean that there's going to bring back a lot of the jobs that are being lost. And I guess people just don't think they need legitimacy anymore. So it's, I mean, I've been surprised. My priors have been off, Djene, because I've actually assumed for all my talk about no adults in the room, that there were people who had a plan or that at least took a lot of this shit that was said seriously. And another thing I saw today is that there's polls, and I don't know how much I believe these polls. I'm seeing push polls now that are really deceptive, like with very small sample sizes and whatnot. But nonetheless, there's polls suggesting that like Democrats want Kamala Harris back, which I just can't even believe. I can't believe that.
I don't believe that either. I mean, that seems like vibes to me. And a lot of these polls, especially this far out from an election, usually mean it's just name recognition, isn't it? Just like it's like you don't know who's running, right? So you say, "I wish we'd had Kamala," right? Yeah, I'm very skeptical about that. We're way too out. We're way too far out for any predictions about what the Democrats want. But it does seem that the Democratic normie base is more angry than usual. That's for sure. Like the normie Democrats. I'm not talking about like the progressives, but like this just seems to be. If you watch like even like never Trump Republicans, you'll notice how they're calling for social democracy now. It's wild. In fact, the only people who seem to be calling for a return to neoliberalism is Ezra Kind and his douchey buddy.
Right.
With their silly abundance nonsense. Like, not that, like, maybe, yeah, like it might be great to have like simpler zoning regulations, but Ezra Klein really should not be taken seriously anymore. Yeah, just because he talks with an authoritative voice that he's like the boomers millennial and, he's been propped up through his Vox and his New York Times position. Utterly utterly failed to do his due diligence by claiming that it was the Democratic Party that imposed the 14-stage planning process on broadband, when in fact, it was Republicans who, it was industry and Republicans that made such an arduous process, right? So, yeah, like the neoliberals in the Democratic Party are in disarray, but there isn't really anyone to take their place at the moment. And I think normie Democrats just want their politicians to just be obstructionist.
Right, which fine. That's my stance on when I was talking to socialists about what they should do is they should only ever participate in elections to burn shit down, because they're not gonna seize power piecemeal like that. I was calling today for people to just primary the shit out of everybody regardless of their party.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to do your electoral politics, you might as well do it seriously, right?
Right. Which is
and Trump has won. Trump won, so you've got nothing to lose now. You can, you're liberated.
That's what I don't understand. I mean, not to blame your fair country for this, but it does seem like James Carville has taken away that through the Keir Starmer election, if you do nothing and win, that you'll be a viable political force, which you could win, but then, I mean, it's not like the Starmer government is super popular or super legitimate or getting a whole lot of shit done.
It's a big problem. This is one thing. One thing I always point to is I get the impulse to want to, get rid of the Republicans. I understand that. It's very easy for people who aren't directly affected by these policies, although I think everyone will be affected by these tariffs, to look at this as an abstract question. But yes, like for certain groups in society, Republican rule is particularly onerous. If you're a homosexual, a trans person, if you're someone on a visa, this is a pretty scary time for you. So I understand that. But the problem is if you bring into power these like a Starmer-esque kind of government, you're just creating the conditions for even more brutal reaction. So
we've already seen that.
We've seen this. Yeah, we've seen this. It's like this is what the Biden administration did. It's to put it another way, if you're going to play capitalist politics, you play big or you go home, right? The Biden administration didn't please anyone by doing half measures and being weak.
Some of you are speculating that there's an Intel deep state that is aligned with these. One, it's hard to believe that since the intelligence agencies have been pretty well gutted. And two, reshoring makes sense for certain capacities, but not for all of them. You can't get everything in the United States.
Well, also, this is just ridiculous. You can't do this tariff stuff without having an industrial policy, tax credits, all this stuff on the other end. There's two sides to this equation, right? Like if you're tariffing a poor country that supplies you with natural resources, you're only shooting yourself in the foot, right? Like if you tariff the Congo, what's that going to do for you? Like Congo is not going to buy stuff from you. You have a trade deficit with the Congo, but you need that rare earth minerals, for a high level industrial production. So none of this this is very incoherent as a policy. They're putting on these tariffs, and Trump's explanations are like make no sense, right? Because 1 minute it's a negotiating tactic to do with fentanyl or something. Then it is a tactic to onshore. It's a tactic to raise revenue for the federal government. So what? You can abolish income tax. And it's also at the same time as being a revenue raising mechanism, it's also going to onshore jobs. But if you onshore the jobs, then the tariffs aren't going to raise you any revenues, are they? Because you're not going to be importing things. So this is utterly incoherent, if you ask me. And I don't think
I have read the part of the Project 2025 on that. In fact, I actually said something about it, about the intelligence agency's relationship to that, because one of my priors that was wrong for those of you who don't know, I'm talking to an audience member here, is that I thought that the intelligence agencies would have read that, saw its incoherence, because it is incoherent. There is no coherency to it, even from a national security standpoint. And gone, oh my God, they want to destroy the stock market, put in a gold standard, kill labor things, and drag the entire world's economy down. And, you know, I've seen people say, you know, Trump is the kind of leader that you put into to a Cadillo state to destroy it. If you don't know what a Cadillo state is, I would actually look that up.
A Latin American military junta.
Right. Now, are there people in the intelligence agency that believe that it wrote parts of this policy? Absolutely. But that's a different thing than having the entire deep state on board, because you there, if you have to purge that much of it, you clearly didn't have a unified deep state security apparatus around that made that much sense.
Well, you can tell this because the national security Republicans have all been purged from the Republican Party, or they're kind of laying low and trying to keep Trump happy.
And even that's beginning to show signs of fracture. You're beginning to see Joe Rogan and co complain about the overzealous deportations and the overuse of the Patriot Act and national emergency powers. You're beginning to see Republican senators push back on the tariff things. You are beginning to see that. The losses in Wisconsin and Florida are severe and surprising.
There was the head of the Wisconsin Republican Party was shocked by the defeat. Now, I wasn't actually super surprised that the Democrats were able to win it's a nonpartisan election. I wasn't surprised, but if you're in the Republican bubble, which is a powerful bubble, you're living in an alternative universe where Elon Musk is a national hero.
Who even believes in America enough to risk their necks other than Trumpists? Actually, the neocons really do, which is kind of surprising. I've actually been surprised at how they believed all their bullshit about freedom and whatnot. I mean, are they naked imperialist ghouls? Absolutely. But they apparently believed it. So, I mean, I want to talk about this though, because there are some interesting things about, we were talking about Keir Starmer in the beginning here. I don't want to get too distracted with the flow of the notes. But allowing the people to pivot to a more ghoulish administration, I mean, Biden's attempt to do continuity of government and normalization created the ability for Trump to run against himself while claiming to run against Biden. I mean, he's undoing policies he set up. And
which includes the trade agreements with Mexico and Canada.
Right. And there's been a lot of attempts to make this make sense. I do think people like John Radcliffe and maybe Kash Patel and a few other people, even though they're insane loyalists in some ways, they actually do have plans. But the problem is Trump's teams don't have the same plans, and Trump seems to pick willy-nilly from what he's going to implement, even in Project 2025 itself. If you actually implement all that, it doesn't make any sense. Like, it's not a coherent set of policies at all. But we should have taken it more seriously. My priors were the Trump policy papers from 2016, which he basically ignored. So when he said he was going to ignore Project 2025, I was like, well, he did before, so why should I trust him? And my priors were wrong.
Yeah, I thought he was just
read that. Go ahead.
I thought he was going to do the same as he did last time. A crueler immigration policy, some strategically located tariffs which the Biden administration continued in terms of steel and things like that. I thought he would continue with the CHIPS Act and sort of lay claim to that stuff. But it just seems really incoherent. I've heard people try to make a case that there's a plan to this. And I think there is a plan to this. They have a kind of belief that, this is going to, rebuild America. But I don't think it's a kind of realistic plan, because just raising tariffs without like a serious industrial policy behind this in such a rapid way is just going to shock the economy. I think they're doing shock doctrine on themselves in certain ways, and at the same time they're doing the coalition provisional authority to the American government. They're like dismantling the American government and shock doctoring the economy in a last ditch attempt to kind of onshore manufacturing. And I think it's just an absurd, it's just bizarre. It's a bizarre set of policies. And I think it's going to break the Republican coalition, because of course within the Republican coalition you've got, there are all these businesses are going to really suffer with this, because it's not like it's not like when you had like COVID and they gave them lots of like free money to like get through the crisis. I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen that the Trump administration has said that it's going to give everybody money to
well,
make
it kind of can't.
How are they going to make payrolls for these companies? Like, if their profit margins are so low and suddenly you stick a 25-30% tariff on that, like they're gonna have to fire people, surely.
Almost certainly. The stock market is in free fall.
It's the great leap forward. It's the Trump great leap forward. We're going to be building freaking microchips in our gardens.
Well, here's the thing.
Unfortunately, no $5,000 efficiency dividend. I don't think that's coming anytime soon.
The GOP has abnegated a lot of its powers to the executive branch. The Trump administration is ignoring judicial orders in a way that actually is unprecedented, not just in like, oh, they're pulling an Andrew Jackson or an Abraham Lincoln. They're doing more than that. Jackson has refused to sometimes enforce judicial orders, but he did actually follow them, believe it or not. And the stuff about habeas corpus with Lincoln, it was frozen, but again, Lincoln did eventually follow the court order. It took a while, but he did. Now, one element of this that I think we under talk about is how much of this stuff is built on the Patriot Act. Like, the Patriot Act is a major component to all this stuff, including the tariffs, because taxation is a congressional right. I don't mean to be like civics 101 to people, but if you look at the way the founders designed the American government, the president was closer to a prime minister when we first established the country. And by that, I mean, it was elected by one of the cabinets of government. It was not, and the electoral college was a compromise. And even that, the democratization of the electoral college was something that happened between like 1940 and the 1970s. And even the Democratic Party's been trying to claw that back since they started doing it. It's been 2 steps towards 1 step back on those shores. And that's why they've become so ideologically motivated. Some of the emergency powers have already been clawed back by the Senate, but Trump will, of course, veto that. We'll see how that goes. But there's, resolutions coming out about that with some Republican support. Now, before we start thinking this is that everything's going to be easy, there's so many comparisons of Trump to obvious, to the great fascists of history. We talked about that, and I think Trump one's and analogous was a bunch of European, what I would call post-fascists like Berlusconi and maybe even Le Pen and people like that. But Trump too feels like a mixture of Louis Bonaparte and fucking Boris Yeltsin. And that should make people worried. And I think a whole lot of Trump has a master plan to like devalue the dollar and return manufacturing to the US while also getting
sounds like copium. Sounds like major wish casting and copium.
Well, even leftists are doing it. I think they're doing it the reason why they're wish casting and coping is because they don't want to admit that they declared detente with a guy who lost to this fucker. Like, would you want to? Would you want to admit that we were singing the praises of Joe Biden, good old Uncle Joe, who lost to this guy, who became so unpopular that he brought the priorly most unpopular president in American history back? Well, at least I shouldn't say American history. American history since we started recording these things. I mean, like, we can't really talk about it before the 30s, but yeah.
It's wild. Totally wild. Totally wild.
Now, there are some people who are going to gain from this. During a recession, there's going to be a buy off of stocks for people who have lots of liquidity. They'll be able to do that. But none of those gains, if you're trying to fight financier capitalism, what is being done doesn't make sense. Right? Now, if you're trying to accelerate financier capitalism and accelerate the concentration of liquid capital and rent holders, this makes some sense, but not a lot still, because you're still undermining your basic profitability base in the long run. It is like what Jack Welch does to companies to an entire fucking nation. Trump never beat Joe Biden? No. Okay,
I'll say this. Trump did never beat Joe Biden. That is true. But I think all indications are that if Joe Biden had run, he would have got beaten by more and probably would have lost a few of those Democratic senators. So I think he probably would have lost. What's the one with no legs called? You know, Tammy something.
Oh yeah.
Tammy Duckworth, right?
I mean, also, you guys are going on a technicality to deal with COPE. Kamala Harris had 100 days to run. She was part of the Joe Biden campaign and seen as an extension of his regime.
And she didn't break from him. In fact, there's this new book that came out. I haven't read it or anything. I've seen some interviews talking about it. And the behind the scenes behind that campaign seems absolutely freaking wild.
You're not interested in counterfactuals? What I stated was a fact. Get the fuck out of my audience, you fucking moron.
Who's not into counterfactuals? I like that book where the Confederacy get machine guns from some South Africans in the future. You know that one?
Yeah.
Guns of the South. Oh, damn. You banned him. Brutal.
I ban people in a heartbeat. I don't deal with this bullshit. I don't need liberals using minor technicalities to pretend that facts didn't happen, using that an I wasn't dotted to pretend that they're speaking fucking Greek. Talking to me about me going with a counterfactual when we're talking explicitly about Joe Biden, who set up his own terms for the debate, which got him ousted from the leadership of his party.
I mean, I think people are forgetting how bad that debate performance was. I mean, people were talking about it back in 2019. I can't remember who it was. Was it Tim Ryan, the Ohio congressman, who was like, Biden's not all there? Yep. And he says, as Chapter Black says, he said, we beat Medicare. And then Trump replies, yep, you beat it to death. And that was the end of it. I don't think anyone, Bosco says, I don't think anyone is saying Biden would have won. There are people saying that.
Yeah, I was about to say, there are definitely people saying that. And also the person who I banned was strongly implying it. And I mean, good God. This is why I have no faith in fucking progressives. None. No faith. Because every chance you get, you will write history in a way where you won't deal with the fact that everything that happened was the fault of the prior administration. Like, Donald Trump, he didn't win he won the popular vote. That's true.
But it was a pretty close election.
But it was still a fairly close election.
What is it?
The House and the Senate are still super close.
Yeah, I mean, like there was no there. I mean, there's all this talk about a landslide. There's no landslide. It's one of the it was a very close and contentious election. And frankly, I think if Kamala Harris, I mean, I think this whole thing that she only had 100 days to run misses the point. I don't think that was the problem Kamala Harris had. I think the problem that Kamala Harris had is that she didn't break with Biden, and then she ended up campaigning with Liz Cheney, which was a very easy. I mean, there was a lot of factors that came. There were 101 different. It was death by 1,000 cuts. Put it another way, the Kamala Harris campaign didn't break with Biden. You had the whole Gaza war going on, which depressed a lot of voters. You had what else, Varn? What other things? You had, and then you have a Democratic Party consultant class, which pays no matter what and deploys all these large amounts of money in a very annoying way, like endless text messages or TV buy ads, because these kind of things are metrics that you can kind of sell to a candidate and say, look, we're reaching all these people, without any thought of the qualitative aspect of how this message is being received by people. You just say we have this many adverts and things like that. Somebody told me they like paid for a huge billboard, which must have cost like $1 million in, on the strip in Las Vegas or somewhere around Las Vegas. Like, what's the utility of that, right? What is the utility of mobilizing hundreds of out-of-state children to run around Pennsylvania, knocking on doors and telling people to vote? Like you had like all these kind of tactical, strategic, and ideological problems, which combined to take the Kamala Harris campaign down. But it was close. The Las Vegas sphere. That's right. It was the Las Vegas sphere. And she said, somebody said, I would put a Republican in my cabinet, totally misreading the room. Like, it's not even like 2016 anymore. It's not even, what does it mean you're going to put a Republican? Nobody wants Liz Cheney in the cabinet. Why are you voting for the other problem is you have all these never Trump Republicans, and the Democratic Party already has a grifty class of campaign managers and consultants. And now not only do they have their own, they also have the Republican Party's grifty class of campaigns consultants inserting themselves in Democratic Party politics.
No, I want to be very clear. When people think I'm talking about Joe Biden, I'm not talking about just Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. Governments and presidential administrations are regimes. They come from the extension of their party and the extension of the apparatus of the entire government in some ways. I mean, even Trump is interesting because Trump may be a case where this is less a regime than most people, since he picked people who, if you look at who got the cabinet nominations and that push through, that was clearly to push through people who would loyalists, because he got a lot of pushback from his internal regime, and Trump won. He's not getting that in the same way now until right now. But the larger problem is that if we are completely honest, I talked about this as Wonktopia versus Griftopia. You have two sets of rent seekers. One set of rent seeker likes the status quo rules, and the other set of rent seekers wants to go even deeper and not play by any rules at all. And those are the areas of the economy they appeal to. Unfortunately, neither one of those represent a huge part of the economy. And you are absolutely right that there isn't a whole lot of anyone who has any positive content or belief in a new vision of the future for America. We've been coping off the fucking 90s for 30 years, which in retrospect, and I actually want to point this out, a lot of the terms and shifts that you see in the GOP now. I mean, if you look at, like, say, Steve Miller, where does Steve Miller come from? California in the 90s.
Which was very right wing.
Right.
One of the things I remember, I used to listen to the radio in the car on the way to school. I remember they even tried to outlaw bilingual education in California or something like that in the 90s.
Right. So is Trump's cabinet basically the same people that any Republican president would pick? No. Actually, no, that's not true.
No, it's not. The first term, yes. I mean, and you have a few people like Rubio. You could imagine Rubio being in a normal Republican's cabinet, right? But are there even any normal Republicans left?
I mean, that's the question. What do we mean by anymore? That coalition's been dying since the Bush administration.
Yeah, it's been a decade.
What Trump has put together is a coalition of people who will kiss the ring, and he doesn't care where they come from. And you see that by the number of recently former Democrats in that administration.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, there's more than one person who was a Democrat until like a year ago in that administration. That's a kiss the ring sort of deal. Now, so I don't think it's the same. I also don't know what any other Republican would have done, though.
Because Trump's dominated the Republican Party for a decade.
Right.
Like, it's like what? Like when you go back, you go back to the 2016 primary.
I mean, we have to think about what the Republican Party was like in 2008.
Or maybe 2012.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think thinking about the Republican Party in 2008 is because the Tea Party, which also Trump isn't the same as them either, despite what people think, but the Tea Party was already angry and dismantling things from within that party to revitalize it. In a way that was attempted before. It wasn't sui generis. It wasn't new. I mean, if you look back in history, you also saw things with the moral majority movement at the end of the Reagan administration that tried to have more influence during Bush, during George Herbert Walker Bush, etc. What I will say is, like, this is not a normal Republican administration. But it also probably is a sign that there would not be a normal Republican administration. Is Trump so sui generis? I mean, all presidents have used tariff powers that were extra congressionally granted since probably about Nixon. None of them have used them like this. And this is absolutely antithetical to everyone but Pat Buchanan and the Republican Party for the past 50 years. So while there is a lot of Trump derangement symptoms out there, and there's a lot of we must project the progressives and stand up for good old Joe because we have to believe that we didn't get hoodwinked by a guy that we celebrated as the most progressive president since FDR, which wasn't even fucking true. Both Nixon and LBJ were more progressive than Joe Biden. But you have been so used to DNC, the children of Atari Democrats, that you forgot what a Mondale Democrat looked like. And Joe Biden's old enough to have been a Mondale Democrat, which is another thing that people forget. Yes, it does look like Trump used the ChatGPT for the tariff chart. It looks like what he did was took the trade deficit, divided it in half, figured out a percentage based on trade using ChatGPT because somebody else ran the ChatGPT question and that's what they came up with, and threw out random numbers that way. It has like the whole we added VATs and all that together. It doesn't look like that at all. It looks like actually relatively simple math of taking the trade deficit, figuring out the amount traded. And
you got to also remember these people are lazy.
Tariff.
Yeah. They're lazy. They're like right-wing people are fundamentally lazy. A lot of right-wing people are fundamentally lazy. One thing you can say about the kind of liberal pencil neck nerds and the eggheads is they kind of are detail orientated. You know what I mean?
Right. No, Trump has been obsessed with trade deficits, not for years. He's been obsessed with trade deficits since
decades.
the 90s at least, maybe even going back to the 80s, maybe even back when Roy Cohn was still alive. I mean, what party did Trump run as first president? Trick question. What party did Trump run as first presidential election campaign out of? Does anyone know? Because I know, because I was in the party at the time, because I was stupid and 20. The Reform Party, correct. He ran against Pat Buchanan in the Reform Party. After the Perot, and actually after Perot, and then after the weird joint Green Reform Nader ticket, he and Pat Buchanan ran in the Reform Party as a kind of protectionist party, and they ran against each other. I knew a guy who actually campaigned for Trump, who became a diehard anti-Trumpist and like hated me because I critiqued the Democratic Party in 2016 to 2020. And I remember he actually like supported the Trump campaign in 2000.
Wild.
Now, I want to make this, I mean, like, this is interesting because I think we have a fundamentally fragile economy before what Trump did, but this is an unforced major recession. I mean, like, I do think the economy was fairly fragile, and I think actually getting rid of a lot of excess capacity during COVID is why we didn't have a recession at the end of about 2021. But you know, I know a lot of my modern monetary friends think that it's actually just good policy making on the Fed's part or whatever, but I don't see a lot of evidence for that. Actually, they don't believe it's good policy making on the Fed's part. They believe that some kind of something between QE and I guess stimulus was keeping. I actually don't understand entirely how they think we were managing the economy, because we weren't actually following all their policy suggestions, depending on which MMT you listen to. But nonetheless, profit margins on traditional commodities have been low for a while. But profits have been high. One of the reasons why that's an important distinction is, you know, when I talk about Marxist economics, I'm often talking about profit margins. That's what we mean by profits. When you talk about conventional economics, stock valuations and how much money you can get in liquidity is actually what they're looking at. And in some ways, I will admit that makes traditional Marxian economics a little bit like unequipped to talk about the current situation. I know that's going to make some people uncomfortable, even though I think the general dynamics of physical commodity production still follow Marxist lines. It's just there's so much other stuff tied into it now. What is Fabio? I don't know what Fabio Virginia is. I don't listen to him. You know what I don't do? All my life is listen to other Marxists. I read about 4 of them.
You don't read Fabio?
No, I don't read Fabio.
Fabio.
Bigi. He sounded too much like a Gambin for me during COVID and almost seemed conspiratorial, frankly.
Well, yeah, we are. I'm actually morbidly curious about how inflation is going to be. Like, what are the prices and how quickly is this bump going to?
I got no idea. I mean, one of the things I will say, and this is maybe where people will kind of get where I'm coming from, is it is clear to me that the Biden administration couldn't handle the complexity of the American economy either, nor did they have enough internal support to get an agenda through. Because while Biden did stuff, he wasn't particularly coherent. they were trying to court big tech and push the AI economy because it was juking GDP stats. And when I say juking, I mean it was real GDP stats. It wasn't fake, but none of that investment has yet turned a profit. It's all based on eventually turning a profit.
And the whole AI bubble is it feels very much like a bubble, because not that there is not that there isn't applications of AI, but I don't know how much money in Studio Ghibli photos there are, man.
Quasi-legal Studio Ghibli photos are literally being used so much that they're melting ChatGPT servers. Seriously. And places without water that are trying to attract tech are also trying to put on nuclear power to better serve the server farms. And I know people like Lee Phillips will argue with me that it doesn't actually take that much power, but I'm literally watching them struggle to build the power infrastructure in places without the water to cool the rods.
Just seems like a real waste of resources. But that's our modern tech economy.
Right. Well, I mean, this is a modern tech economy. This is when I mentioned like Jack Welch, or Lou Welch, who is former guy who ruined General Electric. He started the whole like short-terming your own company so that you could basically private equity yourself, but to really juke the stats in the stock market. It seems like we're running the entire Jack Welch. Thank you. I was right the first time. That is like what we're trying to run the entire economy of the fucking world off of, except for China.
China's just doing better capitalism.
Yeah, they're better at it than us. It's ironic that posting as communism is. I mean, I will say they are having that. Like their GDP has their GDP growth rate. Let me be very clear on that. Has slowed down dramatically. They've lost their consumer of last resort, and they don't really have other ones yet. But there's a lot of signs that things are changing. Despite the Camp David Accords, meaning that Egypt has to use a lot of its aid money to buy American fighter planes, you know what they just bought this week? Chinese and French fighter planes.
Oh yeah, people are going to stop buying, and people looking. It's like the Russians. Nobody wants to buy their weapons now because we've seen they're all a bag of shit after 4 years, 2 years of 3 years of war in Ukraine. Is it 3 years? It's 3 years.
Yeah, although it makes ours look worse. That's the thing. Like, go ahead.
Well, Russia is kind of out of the game. The U.S. has gone nuts. So people are diversifying. In the past, they would have diversified with Russian weapon systems, but now, go to the French and the Chinese can do that stuff.
And they'll probably diversify with Russia. I mean, but the amount of false promises that people are having to swallow is actually kind of amazing. Chinese, Israeli drones are going to be popular, yeah.
Turkish drones, cheap drones.
Yeah, Turkish drones are cheap.
Hell, the Iranians are making drones.
Yeah, Russian arms will be a good deal on the market. Which is, God, that's so dark to talk about. American arms are overpriced, yeah, and they are. Pretty much everything in America is overpriced because of dollar valuation.
We're watching a decline of America, the intensification of the decline of America in real time. It always strikes me, Varn. There's that meme that the conservatives always like to have. It's like, strong men make good. What is it? Good times make weak men make hard times, or something like that. The thing with the conservatives is that they don't realize that they're the decadent weak men, right? That will sink their own country. It's like Britain and Brexit. It's always the reactionary conservatism is the most decadent and sclerotic ideology out there.
I mean, why is it amazing that rubes are swallowing false promises? It's not amazing that rubes are, but if you assume that everybody's a rube, then you're gonna have a hard time explaining a whole lot of what's going on. I do think, yes, there's a core of the Trump base that'll try to justify everything that he does, just like there's a core of the Democratic Party base that'll try to justify everything Joe Biden did. We literally just saw one in the goddamn chat.
Yep.
But I mean,
at some point, it's like you have a wagon with the Republicans, and you shake that wagon, bits and bobs fall off the wagon, but most of the stuff on the wagon ends up staying in there after a while. And this crisis is shaking some Republicans off the wagon, but I think their core is going. I mean, they're too into owning the libs. It's too much culture war. No war but culture war, and it's the same with the Democratic Party. That's why it's impossible to break from the Democratic Party for the left.
I did not try to justify everything Joe Biden did. That was your poor assumption. No, I wasn't talking about you, Stoic Dread. If I was talking about you, I would have told you directly.
The reactionaries always blame the femboys. They do. They're obsessed with the femboys. It's because they secretly want the femboys. What do you think, Varn? Do you think the reactionaries secretly want the femboys?
I don't like psychoanalyzing people. I think that's a cop-out. Probably, but still, I don't know that. Libs love giving right ammo. Yeah, I mean, they do. They do. I mean, you want to talk about a mutually insured destructive feedback loop.
Okay, that.
Oh, I was talking about you, so I get to ban you again. Go fuck yourself.
Damn. You got Stoic Dread as well. See, he would have been safe if he hadn't revealed his true identity. Too weak to bolster a community. I have witnessed a group fall apart by being too sensitive. What's more traditional than using femboys as birth control? Ice cold Varn. I like reading the things. So, thoughts on Trump and Elon's finally falling out? Yeah, I think this election really. I don't think Trump hates Elon Musk, but I think this election is going to make Trump have to push Elon Musk out of the tent a little bit. But I don't see that. I think all the libs in the media who were going like Elon and Trump are going to fall out. Their egos can't handle each other. It's like, they can hear you, right? They know that like they're not so stupid as not to understand that the liberal media was trying to deliberately drive a wedge between Elon Musk and Donald Trump. It's like they could see you doing that. So I think that pushed them closer together. And I think the only reason there's rumors that Elon's on the way out is because he's an election liability. Are you there, Varn?
I think that's all of those skills are useful. I don't know how useful he is or isn't. I mean, like, I'm here.
Oh, good.
No, you're not. You might have a lag, though.
Studebaker's conjecture that all of the Doge stuff is to give some cover for a round of tax cuts. I mean, isn't that like explicit in Doge's mission? Like they're going to cut the state in order to do tax cuts? Any thoughts on normie Dems getting more aggressive and even some never Trumpers becoming social Democrats? Are the coalitions changing? I think a lot of normie Democrats are like, and ironically, I think it's a bit too late for this, but I think a lot of normie Democrats are like, we should have picked Bernie back in 2016. I think that's how they're feeling. I think a lot of normie Democrats who I've spoken to feel like, no, we should have pushed harder. And they're really mad with the weakness of their leadership. Really mad. People were really angry about Chuck Schumer. Extremely angry. I've never seen him like this. Like, the millennial left is having a comeback.
Are they? I mean, I guess AOC and Bernie Sanders are
It's like a Grateful Dead tour. It's like a Grateful Dead. It's like a Grateful Dead tour. Like, and I think they sort of, it's like a nostalgia thing. Brunch is canceled again. I don't know how successful it is, but it does feel, Varn, like there's a kind of rising from the dead of at least parts of that millennial left. Like Bernie Sanders is very clearly anointing AOC as his spiritual successor. And, like from an objective perspective, she has definitely become a more seasoned politician. And I think she's going to go to the Senate.
Yeah, well, I'm just listening. I'm just reading into what people are saying, and I have to say, many of you need to actually read the marks that you talk about not just responding to your opposition. I mean, Marx talks about being oppositional in government, but at no time was he like, just do what's bad for Wall Street no matter what. In fact, he tried to fight those people out of his fucking party. Do you know why he tried to do that? But anyway.
It's all pretty grim. AOC is firmly on her Pelosi arc. Yeah, but it's not exactly the same as a Pelosi arc, is it? Because Pelosi comes out of like a socially liberal, neoliberal Democratic Party that's what got pounded by Reagan for a long time.
Capital value, Marx describes the financial class as parasites. So, did you actually read all of Capital Volume 3? Like, seriously, I know he describes the financial class as parasites, but he doesn't say that they're just parasites. They're necessary to maintain the function of capital, which is something that he says in Capital Volume 2 as well. And he talks about the change of the meaning of rentierism in Capital Volume 1. The productivity of the financial sector is based off of how much it allows commodity production. It does become more and more parasitic over time. There's no denying that. But if you collapse it, you collapse the flow of capital altogether. And if you don't have anything already to take its place, nothing automatically goes to you. That's a selective reading of Marx. Wall Street is the main danger. They captured the government and fund the think tanks. Sean, I respect you, but no, that's not just what's happening, nor is Wall Street the only danger. You're a degraded social subject, all of you. All of you are a degraded social subject, and you need to hear it. You don't have the discipline to not take up oppositional politics. This reminds me of the lunacy of the people. I didn't defend the Wall Street bailouts.
Go Wall Street bailouts. So if Trump is our Yeltsin, who's going to be our Putin? AOC. She'll start putting people in the gulag, Varn. She'll be deporting people for using the wrong pronouns.
Yeah. It's too stupid.
Varnites, you're making Varn tired and upset. You better stop. What do you think about Controne saying that the labor theory of value is aspirational?
Don't ever ask me about that lovely art professor again.
Vance is someone I worry about. I'm glad to hear that, Varn. I respect you as well. We will get an acronym as good as top. Woke Putin. Yeah, that's what I want. I want woke Putin.
Without finance capital, productive capital has no source of credit and means it can't leverage against time. Right. You do have to control the financiers. Don't get me wrong. There's a reason why classical capitalists hated them, but they didn't ever get rid of them.
Necessary evil. You need. I swear, people come here and ask Catrone questions just to rile Varn up. I mean, yeah. I send Varn Platt things all through the day to make him angry. I'm like, hey, have you seen this? And he's like, don't do it. Don't do it to me. Why are you doing it?
She does have the connections in the New York Machine. Here's the thing. The New York Machine is an interesting problem because the DSA actually is part of the New York Machine and has been since the 80s. But I don't know. I mean, here the question is how sincere do you take any of this? I do think I'm going to push back on Djene a little bit. I do think we have to remember 80s Pelosi before we get to aughts Pelosi, because 80s Pelosi was like a Mondale progressive type trying to reform the party against the Atari Democrats. That is her origins. Feinstein similarly, actually, which is crazy to think about now. But there is a difference in the way the party is going to try to portray themselves. Yeah, what does this mean is LDP is aspirational, like individual aspirations for how to live, a social idea. But it's the idea that somehow that we should have, that the aspiration is the economy of Adam Smith. And you will notice that Platts read Adam Smith more than they read Capital Volume 1, 2, or 3. But I really am tired of talking about it. Why are we talking about a group of like 500 people?
Because they're fun.
Maybe you guys, I mean, like, look, this has been my entire complaint. No one has any social discipline anymore. I mean, even I'm beginning to lose my fucking discipline. I'm talking to you guys.
But they're your cult, Varn. You've cultivated them. Just as Chris cultivated Doug.
I am not. I'll stab you. I know what city you're in, Djene Bajalan.
Yeah, you know. Finally.
You're a public figure. What about
Trump looks at Vance like his puppy. Vance, like people think Vance is an ideologue. I just don't believe he is. I believe he's like a pure opportunist.
Yeah, I do too. I don't think he's an ideologue.
I don't think he's an ideologue. I think he's like a pure opportunist. There's Varn Vlog and there's the Varn of many faces. Thoughts on DSA membership growing again? Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised DSA DSA growing again, but it's not like it's not like 2020, 2016, 2017, because the Zoomers aren't into it. Zoomers are.
Yeah, it's not the Zoomers, but the Zoomers are a small generation, Djene. Like, there are not that many of them. I'm really trying to be communist official cause for nationalizing means of production. Yes, it does. Although you do need to read the later writings on the Offert program and the Guffert program, because
he says we've moved past that now. Marx he says no, don't listen to that from the Communist Manifesto anymore. It like that's the problem with like this is something I'll put my historian hat on. You have to contextualize readings in terms of the time they were written, the purpose with which they were written, and how someone's intellectual. You can't just take Marx's writing as kind of frozen pieces of writing. Communist Manifesto was not like some dusty academic tome that was meant to be for all seasons. It was like a political act, and Marx moved on from it. Engels moved on from it. They explicitly said, like, we've moved on from that program. Allow people to evolve over time.
I do.
So
I do think nationalization. I mean, one of the things I'll say that to defend Sean a little bit, Ingalls never drops nationalization. He just says it's not sufficient. That socialization is actually not the same thing as nationalization, because nationalization is still a form of effectively limited ownership of the means of production in the hands of a state. The other thing, however, is you're not supposed to nationalize anything until the workers have control over the state. I mean, that's clear as crystal in Marx. If anyone thinks that and another thing I want to point out is Ingalls also says in Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific that the stock market is the means of socializing labor. But I do think like you have to deal with nations as they are. I mean, we can argue. I think Djene and I are both agreeing with Harun Yamez that one of the problems that you have in Marxist dialectics is that there is an assumption that if you got everyone nations, they would just stop being nationalists. And it even went down to like their racial theories. Marx thought that like the races would improve because he did have some like geographical racial determinism going on. Because once we started building once we had independent nations and the workers started working together to transcend those national boundaries, and the nations were only administrative units because of history and language, that they would go away, and we would also start intermarrying and producing like a socialist super race. And no, I'm not joking. That is implied in his letters. Who said that? Marx letters. Read the letters. I've read almost everything I can get about Marx in English.
Also I would add that wasn't necessarily unique for the time. That was a kind of liberal idea that was taken up. That's like what you read in Garibaldi and what's his name, Mazzini. Who say like who regard nationality as the just administrative division of labor within European civilization, within a common civilization.
Do you think they really thought that was going to be true throughout the world? I don't. I mean, I think maybe Marx and Engels did, but I can't tell like what they thought was Europe specific and what wasn't.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? It's like I guess people. It depends if they believe that European civilization could be universalized, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean the reason why Engels and Marx said that corporate planning is prefigurative to socialism and capitalism was that it actually is social. It is a socializing factor of labor. You're not producing for an individual entrepreneur anymore. You're producing for a board that's a set of stakeholders with plans. Now, I don't think they thought it would ever get to the advanced chaotic stage that we have now. So, I'm not saying that I necessarily even think Marx was right or Marx and Engels was right about that. I'm just telling you what they thought. Back to the Wall Street problem. Look, I don't think we should be I don't think we should be celebrating when Wall Street number goes up all the time. I want to be clear on that. That's not necessarily good either. It's how the number goes up and what the number goes up. But the last thing you want is massive unemployment, because you know what unemployed people can't do? Stop the means of production. And I also think you do have to think about the changes of war technology. In some ways, when people talk about this stuff, they're talking about like insurrectionary civil wars, the same way conservatives talk about insurrectionary civil wars, but people with heroic singular guns, going after it, not people with massive cluster bombs, drones, and gas.
True.
I mean, so it's I don't say that to be too not nihilistic, but when people talk about that kind of insurrectionary revolution as if it's the 19th century, I want to remind you the only reason that it even happened in Russia and China were 2 world wars.
Yeah,
I got asked about Signal. Go ahead, Gene. Sorry.
No, I was going to. The states learned after 1848 they needed police.
Right.
I mean, one of the only reasons 1848 was such a big deal was because many of these states didn't have like much of a security apparatus. I mean, they had armies, right? They had like some enforcers here and there, but like they didn't have the apparatus of a modern police state.
No, the modern police state starts in, I believe, the British occupation of Ireland. I mean, people will talk about it as coming out of American slavery, and it is true that a lot of police departments came out of American slaveholders, but it actually starts with the British occupation of Ireland, as far as I can tell. There are precursors to police. Sheriffs are an old institution, but they're a quasi-military institution, and they're basically about tax farming. And also, it's a shared responsibility that is quasi-democratic. Someone asked me about Signalgate. What I'm learning is even I didn't assume that our elites were, and I mean bipartisan across the board. I don't mean Republican elites. That our elites were
not Robert Walpole, Robert Peel. Peelers.
Peel's the police, right? Yeah.
Peelers, bobbies or peelers?
Yeah. But doesn't the constability in Ireland predate the London police?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly, like, but really, like the modern police state is a late 19th century invention anyway.
Yeah. The extent that at which it exists today. All right. Someone asked about Signalgate. I just said that, Gene.
Yeah.
When I talk about it, the greatest subject, I'm not like just insulting my own audience. I know you think I'm just a dom with all these nerds. I love you guys, nerds, but still.
A Varn power top.
But I mean everybody, because one of the things I've been surprised at is how incompetent university admin is. How incompetent. Like, you would have think with 2 years of warning, the military would have had more of a plan to deal with what was happening. Maybe they did, but they seem to let themselves get purged pretty hard. And so, like, it does seem like we are in, if you read Joseph Tainter, and I know liberals really don't like Joseph Tainter because they don't like anything that says decadence and decline is inevitable. But if you read Joseph Tainter, the idea is you have such specialized people with such niche privilege that they are smart. They understand a very narrow stretch of the world very well, but you have removed all the generalists. And so they make super dumb, not common sense things. And then when you have people who are like, their niche is like grifting people, which a whole lot of the management class is, and both Democrats and Republicans come out of that. I mean, like when people are like, oh, the Republicans are fighting the PMC, I'm like, all those fuckers are from Yale too.
Yep. This is one of the things that really annoys me, Varn. Really annoys me. It's and people I like and respect always do this, talk about the PMC exclusively within the context of liberalism and the Democratic Party. It's like, no, man, this is a fight within that. You have your conservative. I'll grant you that the liberals are the majority amongst this professional managerial class in many ways, especially the top layer that goes to these elite universities. But they have their own institutions. Just because someone graduated from Hillsdale or from Liberty University, there's still a PMC, right? And Republicans, especially if you live in a small town or like a medium-sized city like me, like the professional managerial class is not universally democratic, right? You have tons of Republicans. If you look at who dominates the Republican Party, you've got the Chamber of Commerce, but you have lawyers, doctors, educators. Yes, they often are not coming from the same super elite universities, but they all want to go to those super elite universities. They all want to go to Yale Law. They all want to go to those places. You know,
where did Hegseth come from? Even I mean, I say this because he's like the quintessential example of like an outsider kind of almost joke, right? Where did he graduate from school? Does anybody know? Because
Josh Hawley, Yale. J.D. Vance, Yale. Ted Cruz,
Yale.
Yale. Yeah, it's like so this whole thing about PMC this, PMC that. There's an element of truth to it, but it's like a bipartisan thing. Both parties are dominated by a professional managerial elite of lawyers and businessmen and what have you.
Hegseth is Princeton. Hegseth
Ted
is
Cruz is
Princeton, and he went to Harvard Kennedy School. Yeah.
Yeah, you see, come
I
on.
mean, like, yeah, I mean, like, so even you know, television presenters, and that's also because we've been, you know, we've seen a lot of this. We've seen a lot of this. But weird, but are parallel and parasitic antagonist figures in institutions like Hillsdale Hill, PMC. I mean, I don't. You guys know my opinion on that. Is that category isn't entirely coherent. And it's always moving around who we're talking about. But I would say if you went to Hillsdale College but still got finished off at Princeton or Harvard or Stanford or the Hoover Institute, which is where again, or you know, God, some of these people come from Yale and Princeton. It's still a very incestuous group,
dude. Like, yeah, I mean, like, I went to an elite university, and like a significant number of people I know are in like high-powered positions now. And on very different political orientations.
I mean, our Hillsdale career types contained within conservative institutional bubbles. Okay. Here's the problem with the PMC category, as I've said 1,000 times. Most people define it from Ehrenreich's definition. That means anyone with a BA or above is PMC. Period. Doesn't matter where you got it from. Doesn't matter if you're a lead or not. Doesn't even matter if you're working in the field that you train for. Like, now, everybody else realizes there's a problem with that definition, so they kind of ad hoc fix it. Right? But there's no consistent definition to the term. You guys throw it around because it was a way to explain Bernie's loss as a theodicy. Instead of like liberals have bad ideas and they don't just, yes, they come primarily from a university class, but not just from there. There's a lot of working class bloggers and shit who picked up those ideas off Tumblr when they were fucking 15. Never been to college, and they're quoting Audre Lorde and
yeah, people think like working class people are stupid. It's like nobody despises the working class more than like working class people read fucking books. Like perhaps not as much as university educated people, but they still do.
They used to read books.
Well, yeah. Well, now even university educated people don't read books.
If I have to count the PMC background or not. Well, here's the thing. I would just say like you could talk about this as like an elite and a counter elite that both come from the same stratas of society, right? And
I think you can
go ahead.
I think you can have a fuzzy PMC definition, right?
Right.
Where you have like, you know, it's not just anyone in the elite, right? It's not like a business person necessarily, although it could be. But generally, we're talking people who've been through the kind of formation through the university system. That's where they've kind of, they have certain skills. And then upon graduating, have entered into professional or managerial style roles. Like Aaron Wright looks at it as just having this university education, but I don't think it makes sense to call someone who has a bachelor's degree and then goes off and works
at McDonald's as a sub manager. I guess it would be a manager though. But go ahead.
Well, is doing like retail, right?
Right.
A 25-year-old, right, with a bachelor's degree working at a kind of entry-level job in a business is not a PMC, right?
I do think there's a core truth to this that we need to talk about with universities, and I don't think we should think the universities are our friends. One, I mean, even normies are now picking up the line that universities are basically, what is it? The bigger universities, private or public, are basically hedge funds with hospitals that happen to teach students by accident. But what you're gonna say, Djene? You work in the field.
I mean, I was going to say, when Aaron Wright was writing this, what, in the late 70s, early 80s?
Only 20% of people had degrees.
People didn't go to university. Now it's like 44%, and in some countries it's 45%. So I think, like, for this, I mean, I like the term PMC to a certain extent, because it speaks to both a kind of position in society, but also a kind of cultural formation and set of values. But like, let's not go too far with it. That's why I kind of reject the partisan use of it. Like, the Democratic Party is the PMC class. It's like nonsense. You come to a small town and the professional managerial types are all Republicans and conservatives, right? They might have a different habitus. I mean, you just look at the discourse that comes out of the Republican Party, like when Vivek told everybody that they needed to, like, not watch Saved by the Bell or something.
Who composes the right conservative movement? Well, okay, so that's actually a good question, and it's changed. At least it's changed in 2024. So the trend has been that the Democratic Party base is the urban poor, not necessarily the urban working class, not necessarily not the working class. I'm specifically using the urban poor because libs track things according to poverty.
Mm-hmm.
And people who make over $200,000 a year as a family income, that is, or $250,000 a year, that is the Democratic average aggregate base. The Republican average base was 100 to 200,000 a year. So that's going to be mostly like petite bourgeois people and some kinds of professionals who work that are rural or ex-urban. And chamber of commerce types. However, in 2024, the Democrats really did lose the majority of the people making under 100K. Yeah, I mean, the problem is the temporary bearless millionaires. I totally agree. My issue with that is not that it's wrong, but the people like that's only in America. No, it's not. I've been reading about the end of the Soviet Union. That shit was all over the apparatchik class in the Soviet Union. They were all pretending to be descended from the aristocrats that the government that made them apparatchiks literally killed. So it was bizarre to like see that parallel development from lower end apparatchiks at the end of the Soviet Union. All kinds of people do that. They misidentify who they are as a way to establish themselves as a new elite. But I do think Americans do that. Yeah. I mean, Werner Sombart, who everyone's always hesitant to talk about because he ended up a Nazi. But when he was a Marxist, he wrote a book, Why There Isn't a Revolution in America. And he talked about it in two terms. Now, he didn't say settler colonialism, but he described settler colonialism. He said the American worker has enough access to land that is taken from what we would now call indigenous peoples, that they actually save and scrape and reinvest in ways that the European worker does not. And if you look at it today, it's reversed. Right? The European worker is more likely to have investments and stuff, and the American worker is more likely to like drink themselves to death. It was reversed 100 years ago. But the reason why he said that is he said the land gave you a feeling that temporary embarrassed millionaire thing was a real possibility, and that since there wasn't an aristocracy as established here that was like landed in thousands of years old, there was an aristocracy, but it wasn't like in the same kind of scale that you could believe that you could go up into it, because a lot of our like Gilded Age capitalists did just that. They really did come from like
Nothing.
not from nothing. Not all of them. There was a hot bourgeoisie even in the 19th century, but there was enough people getting up who were able to climb up that you could believe it, and you couldn't believe it in Europe.
That's why the class terms in Britain are different in America. When you say middle class in Britain, you could be earning £300,000 a year and be middle class because you're not an aristocrat.
Right. You're a bourgeoisie, actually, right?
Yeah. Or, you could be whatever, but it's like, it's not about money, right? You could be impoverished living in a giant house with no income, and you're still upper class. And people embrace the label working class. Here, everyone in America is middle class.
I mean, and we don't even agree on how to define that, right? Like, do we define, like, sometimes we define it by job, sometimes we define it by income, and sometimes the most popular one amongst liberals is defining it by education. When liberals do reports on the working class, they mean anyone without a BA, even when they're talking about people in the same job. I went through a whole paper where I showed this. It was maddening. Like, so if you have and their reason for that is not even your earning capacity, it's your possible earning potential. Because the idea is, if you have a BA, even if you're in the 52% of people who don't work with anything that requires it once you get it, that there is a chance that you could, therefore you are not working class, even if you were doing a working class job. I literally read a paper where they were talking about working class and non-working class people working in the same jobs. And I'm like, that doesn't make any fucking sense to me. Like, I'm like, no, your class is defined by what you do. Like, go ahead.
Yeah, it's like, it's the way that, like leftists get confused when they talk to liberals and conservatives, because when they're talking about class, they're talking about different phenomena. For the liberals, for both liberals and conservatives, it revolves around education. And not about your relationship to the means of production. Simple as that.
Yeah, Dr. Smurfo has a point. Both the slave states and the free labor states wanted to expand west. The free labor states movement needed the land for social movement. Right. And things were already getting sclerotic in the East Coast. So not to fall into the European condition, that's what they were concerned about. That's why they were fighting over it. The other thing you need to remember is that also, when we had anti-imperialist coalitions in America, unlike Europe, there were a lot of former reactionary slaveholders on the anti-imperialist side for racist reasons. So there was a weird coalition, for example, of people who opposed the Mexican-American War, because some of them opposed it because they thought it was immoral and wrong, and some people opposed it because they didn't want brown people in the country.
Same with the Anti-Imperialism League, socialists and racists.
Yep. And when we talk about like Confederate, like ex-Confederates and what they did, you had freebooters who were trying to expand slavery in the Latin America, and then you had people who were trying to like curtail and build island America and like not even expand westwardly. Like some of the ex-Confederates were like kind of against westward expansion. So it was all over the place. The chances of a dim victory, and I'm tired of trying to predict like what party's going to win.
I mean, I think if things stay on track, the Democrats are probably going to win back the House.
Right. And who knows what they'll do. What I don't know is we're in an interesting place in popular opinion where the Democratic Party polls abysmally, but Republicans are also losing. And I could even see states that we think are fairly well stayed start to flip politically. So you might see more and more conservative stuff in very, very blue states.
In New York, watch New York.
Right. I think Chrisman is getting better. I've heard some good things about him. What about, I mean, there's a lot of super red areas in California too, like super red areas in California. I don't know about blue Texas, but I can see a lot of other states start to shift. Texas is hard to predict because it's so fucking big.
Blue Missouri is not happening.
No, I don't think blue Utah's not happening either. But we are. Who knows what we're gonna see?
Although you never know, because
encouraging socialist regular elections. Who knows?
Thoughts on Zoran Mamdani and any potential for him anywhere? I mean, I think he's going to get crushed by a machine, but maybe not. Who knows?
I mean, who knows? Because Eric Adams declared candidacy today as an independent. So,
oh yeah, criminal.
So
imagine me getting bribed by Turkey. That's like pretty ghetto. It's like, come on, get bribed by the Saudis. You know, they've got real money.
William Markham going down to Nicaragua. Yeah, that's through the freebooters.
Sean K. Red Long Island, Red New Jersey.
Cuomo will be mayor. I think Cromer's definitely online to be mayor. But
yeah, I mean, yeah. Like, don't people just vote for the person they know? I mean, we don't do woke anymore, do we? So, like, no. you can have a sex offender.
We're post that, man.
We're post, you know, like, isn't he black, Jewish, everything anyway? You know, Cuomo is our man. He's a Cuomo-sexual. I mean, just imagine that. It's so funny. This is why I can't take the Democrats seriously. It's like they do all this whining about. It's like always these guys. It's like, why is it when you cancel Bill Clinton? He's like a horrible sex pest. Don't give me all this like how terrible. You know, it's always the woke ones. It's always the woke ones. There was this guy. Ron, let me tell you a story. Right, I won't name names. Last I checked, he was a PhD student at a very prestigious American university. Anyway, back in, I think, 2010, I was elected as the social support officer at the St. Anthony's College Junior Coroner Room. And this guy, who was a Cascadian guy, anarchist, whatever, I don't know. He had those round glasses, not like my cool round glasses, but like some other round glasses. And like, he was like, anyway, long story short, he demanded that we have consent workshops to inform people about like the importance of consent. I was like, you can't make it mandatory for people to have consent. He was very upset about that. He also told me that he had gay sex in order to challenge his heteronormative behavior. And it was like, I mean, you should just have gay sex if you want to have gay sex. Like, you don't need to challenge it, but whatever. Anyway, that guy, stalking, arrested for stalking. Always the woke ones that are the dodgiest. Freaking stalkers.
I just assume everyone's dodgy, Gene. Like, that's my assumption.
I suppose so. Isn't the damned possibility winning just a return to what gave us Trump in the first place?
Yeah, yes, it is. I mean,
this is the copium, right? This is the copium. This is the like thinking that the Democratic Party is finished is actually just deep down a massive amount of copium, because the reality is sadder. Like, in all likelihood, and you don't know what the future is, so things might change. I might look silly, right? The Democrats might just come back with the freaking lame Pete Buttigieg, and he'll be president for 4 years, and then we'll just get someone like Trump, like a JD Vance type person.
I mean, the thing is with JD Vance is he is a smart opportunist, so he's likely to pivot to something else. But I don't know, man. Everything feels copy to me.
On the flip side, we could just live in the personal dictatorship of Donald Trump till he dies, of burger overconsumption.
But to say, like, my thing is declaring yourself God Emperor like 79 is not usually a way to have a strong empire.
He doesn't look good. He looks like a Matrushka doll these days.
Vance pivot to something more lucrative. Vance will pivot wherever. Remember, he started off as a never Trumpist. Like,
look, first female president, Lauren Boebert. I would get behind that. I want a Hunter Biden, Lauren Boebert unity ticket to bring the country together. That's what.
Luckily, Djene, you can't vote.
I know, but I want that piece. You know, Lauren, can we? You know, like Lauren Boebert is definitely one of the freakiest members of Congress.
I mean, fair enough. Nothing matters anymore.
They've got this new free. They've got this. My friend was telling me they've got this Florida Congresswoman, a smoking hot Latina, the Luna something, who's an absolute mental. Right? They had this crazy woman called Valentina Gomez running for Attorney General here in Missouri. Absolutely freaking crazy lady. I don't know if anyone's seen I don't know if anybody's seen Djene, Republican president's ambassador to Turkey. You know, if they wanted to fuck with Turkey big time, they'd send me as the ambassador. I would like fuck with them all the time. I'd be like, tariffs, mate. You're getting tariffs. Oh, what's that tariffs? Right? The kebab tariff. No kebabs. We'll have kebab sanctions. Democrat version of Sarah Palin. We need a Democrat Sarah Palin.
I mean, that theoretically was supposed to be AOC.
Yeah, but AOC is too sensible. She's got sensible shoes, sensible haircut. She seems like a very nice person.
Sarah Palin had a sensible haircut.
Who has a sensible hair?
Sarah Palin. I mean, why are we
Sarah Palin? Sarah
20
Palin.
years ago?
Sarah Palin looks like the kind of woman who, you know, you go to a house party at her daughter's house, and she ends up, you know, screwing like two of the football team, like total cougar. Sarah Palin was a MILF. Yeah, she was the OG MILF politician.
That Gomez chick was the one who did a video on Twitter that she did mock version of it. Yeah, and it actually, like, Eric Prince told her to stop. Eric Prince told her to stop. Like,
the Palin family was extremely trashy, and you know I can respect that. That's like do you remember they had that? What's his name? My favorite one. They had the Katie Hill was a California congresswoman who had to resign from her seat because she had like a three-way with like her staffers. I'm like, that's so game, you know. Like,
I mean, why is Crystal Ball a pundit and not a politician?
Why is she
because of a party picture? Because of a party picture.
What was the party picture?
She had too much fun somewhere.
Oh, was she getting double teamed or something?
I don't know. No, I don't remember. I don't even think it was
I'm gonna
that
look this up
scandalous.
now. Ben Burgess is so jealous of Kyle Kalinske for deep down I think Ben Burgess wants to marry Crystal Ball.
Jesus, Djene.
No, I'm joking. I'm just messing with you people. He went to the wedding. I was like, wow, you got invited to the wedding? That's pretty awesome. I like Kyle Kalinske. Like, I remember seeing him way back when he used to do like atheist stuff. You remember when atheist stuff was cool?
Yes, I do, Djene. I do remember.
Atheist
20 years
really
ago.
Cool. It was like
when we were young and spry, and you were just painting Warhammer figures and
exactly. I was painting Warhammer figures and listening to the Armored Skeptic, right? You know, yeah. He was like, now he's got his hair all like done up smartly. He's got like an Eminem thing going on there. He's shouting less. You know, he's going on. Crystal Ball literally just took a picture of the fight. That's it.
Having too much fun. It was back in the day when we were like now what people got canceled.
She just seems like a really normal person. Like Crystal Ball seems like a very normal person, to be honest. She comes off of I watched that program. What's it called? The one with the high caste Hindu grifter. I mean, I know I say high caste Hindu grifter. It could be anyone these days, but like,
let's say you say that constantly.
Like, I'm going to convert. You know, I have.
You might even start saying it about white people. Like,
No, I mean, it's like, how do they get all these where do all these high class Hindu grifters? It's like they're
they
everywhere.
come from H-1B visas, Gene.
They come from H-1B visas, and like not only that, it's like they take over both the woke and the anti-woke side of everything. For every goddamn saga, there's a Spivak. You know, it's insane.
Gene, if this doesn't stop soon, you're going to be talking about the protocols of the elders of Desi.
Of Hindustan. Yeah, I'm telling you, I am. The protocols of the elders of Hindustanis. Yeah, it's insane. It's like I saw. You know, have you heard of that group called? They had a thing called Race to Dinner. Did you hear about that?
Yes,
I believe I didn't watch that stupid Matt Walsh documentary, but I think they were included in it. But it was this thing where they get white suburban middle class women to have like a struggle session about how racist they are. And they've got a black woman, but there's this Indian woman in there. And it's just like, what are you doing there? It's like, I'd get it if they went to Britain and did it, but what you know, the Americans never oppressed the Indians, you know? And all these high class Hindus, they all go back to India and have like Dalit slaves and stuff like that. It's bonkers, utterly bonkers. You've got your Viveks out there. I mean, we've got a Vivek, we've got a Rohana. What's that about? Bro's been drinking. I have been drinking. I had 2 of these cider waves. Don't get me started on.
I was going to say, I know what Gene says in private. So, like,
I mean, it's woke again. It's like,
oh,
it's
man.
nuts. It's nuts.
Are you like trying? I think maybe you were gonna like tell me that like secretly probably all these people are Modi supporters regardless of what party they are in America. Like,
isn't JD Vance, even he's been honeypotted by him.
Oh god damn it.
He's been honeypotted, but like, how's he gonna save the white race if he's not, you know, if he's doing white genocide? That's what it's all about. I'm telling you, there's something fishy going on here. I think it's all a Modi long con. He's like, we're gonna get our guys in there. They're gonna take over both parties. Next election will be Vivek versus Rohana. They did it in Britain. They already installed their man in Britain, and he's an American citizen as well. What's his name? Rishi Sunak. He could come and be president. How about that?
He can't because he's not natural born, but
oh no, he's not natural born. That's true. That's true.
Even if you got naturalized, Gene, you can never be president.
I would never want to be president.
No one should want to be president. Like God,
that's like
think worse, actually.
You see, this is what happens when you've been on TIR too long, because we do the TIR race science. Like, I know all about the different races. Got my calipers in the back. It's crazy. You got to watch out. Yeah, you got to know the surnames. That's the critical thing. You got to know the surnames. Got to know those surnames. Gives the cast away. Playing both sides, exactly. They're playing both sides. They're like the CIA, like a whole race of the CIA.
Oh, okay, Gene.
You've got to force Varn to put this on private.
I said I was going to keep this up. Like,
you got to keep this. I'm just joking, guys. I love the people of India. They are great people. They are great people who have suffered greatly under the rule of the British, and now they're getting revenge.
How do you feel about Osama's watching? Oh, Jesus Christ.
Oh, don't get my. How about? Yeah, you see, there you go. Sneaking in the Trotsky. And she's a bad podcaster. It's like she should have stayed on that city council, because like that city council to podcaster, that's a step down. Now she's on all she does seems to do is go on Brianna Joy Gray's podcast and yell about Ryan Grimm. Ryan Grimm, why are you such a sellout to the Democratic Party? It's like,
I mean, to be fair, she's not totally wrong about that.
He's not totally wrong, but Ryan Grimm never said he wasn't selling out to the Democratic Party.
That's also true.
It's like why is this guy a Democrat? Why is he selling out to the Democratic Party? It's because he's a Democrat. It's like, why are you mad at Democrats for being Democrats? It's the weirdest thing. Tulsi Gabbard, fake Indian. What's going on there?
Okay. Are you going to rant about Nikki Haley too now? Jesus,
even you're doing this on purpose, Varn. You're doing this on purpose. I mean, you see, my ancestors actually participated in the conquest of India. The Bajalan tribe were raised as a tribal regiment under the leadership of Nadir Shah, and we went at the Battle of Charnal, murdered all the elephants with cannons with Zamburak. Do you know what a Zamburak is, Varn?
Yes, I know what a Zamburak is.
A Zamburak, for anyone who doesn't know what a Zamburak, it's a camel with a cannon on the back. And let's just say if you park your elephants and fire a cannon at them, it's not going to end well for you.
Tulsi doesn't have any Hindu heritage, Varn. I didn't say she did.
Is she Samoan? She's very thin for a Samoan. Don't they all have like serious illnesses because of the food that they distribute there? Like, there's some real health problems in American Samoa. They really screwed over those people.
Oh yeah, they really. I was about to say, I work with a lot of Samoans here and a lot of Tongans here in Utah. Believe it or not, they're a pretty large community here, and they don't have those problems. So
yeah, it's when they're on the island.
Like
they like ship them terrible food. Phrenologist scholar. I mean, yeah. No, colonials. I mean, what they've done to those Pacific Island people is just horrific. Yeah,
it's pretty bad.
It's like one of the most disgusting
colonialism. Colonialism is bad, folks, despite what some people might try to tell you.
Yeah, exactly. Colonialism is bad.
Even when it involves cannon camels.
Marxist, well, yeah, I am the founder of the Marxist Calhounist tendency, so I don't know why you're all surprised about my extreme interest in the Oriental races. I am, after all, a member of the Oriental race. The Bikini Atoll, the Bikini Atoll evacuation. Another Diego Garcia.
That's horrific. Wow, know about Bikini? Go ahead.
No, Diego Garcia, where the British government basically just depopulated the island, dumped them all off in Mauritius, and then lied about it and said no one ever lived on these islands and gave it to the US as a military base. And then Trump still put tariffs on it. Still put tariffs on the British Indian Ocean territory, which there is a US military base.
They under-supported them with food too. They put them in a place that couldn't support the population that they put them there, and they started starving. And yeah, it's real bad.
Yeah, when people talk about some of the worst colonialism out there, it's been on islands.
God, it's terrible. I mean, even in places like Canada, what happened to the indigenous people of Newfoundland? They don't exist anymore at all.
Indigenous people of Haiti. You don't find indigenous people in the Caribbean islands anymore, do you? It's absolutely horrific stuff.
Oh, we're talking about racial theories. I don't talk about racial theories in Asia because I don't want to make other people's racial theories worse. But I had a Korean fan who started screaming about weird racial stuff in my Discord once, and I had to ban him.
Korean racial? Well, they're done. The South Koreans are done. There'll be none of them left in 20 years or 30 years. They're all they have no children.
Well, they do have some, but yes.
There was a Kurgan's video about it, and it was quite funny. I was watching it, and I've heard about this demographic crisis in Korea, and they're like, "There's nothing you can do about it," and it's like, there is something you can do about it. You can open the doors and have fucking immigration.
Well, they do have some immigration. The part of the issue is though they don't consider people who are half Korean to generally be Korean.
It's like Korean culture is dying. Well, maybe if it's that racist, needs to change. Someone was trying to defend to me. He was like, well, Zarathustrians don't marry out, I was like, well, that's stupid, right?
I mean, that is why there's not that many Parsis left.
Yeah, he's like, I mean, that's stupid. Why can't anyone, like, they don't let people become Zaradaustrian. So it's like, well, they should if they want to survive as a community. Silly people.
And they
Have you
are
ever
in
heard
some
about,
places.
have you ever
Go
heard
ahead.
about Japanese right-wing fear mongering about immigration? No, but I do know there's Kurds in there's not many Kurds in Japan, but there are some. My dad went to Japan and found a Kurdish restaurant there. And Kurds find Kurds. There's a lot of Iranians there, apparently, just in general.
All right, so someone asked me what the birth rates per women in North Korea was. They are not replacement rate. It is 1.7 or 1.8 per household. So you're not replacing a household. It is higher than Russia or South Korea, though. South Korea is 0.7 per household. Holy shit, that's like,
yeah, it's really low. That's why they like it's I mean, you can't talk about this like people think you're weird when you talk about like maybe people should have more kids, but it's like rather than forcing people to have kids, maybe like make it possible for people to have kids. I saw an interesting TikTok. Sarah showed me an interesting TikTok, which said that the reason people fantasize about the trad wife tradition is not because they actually want to be trad wives. They just want to have time to be able to cook a meal, spend a whole day cooking or like learn how to
because it's
sew.
a luxury to have a stay-at-home partner.
It's a pure
such an extreme luxury.
It's absolutely bonkers.
To put it in perspective, the birth weight of the United States that we complain so much about is about the same as North Korea. The birth rate in Canada is 1.3. The birth weight in Japan is also about 1.3. This is fascinating. Not that I'm like, people have accused me of being pro or anti-natalist. I really actually don't totally care about this. I think society kind of adjusts. But let me look at this. No, I don't want to see the stuff about the stock market. I know how bad that is. I want to see fertility rates. World fertility rates. All right. The world fertility rate is 2.3, which is still pretty down. And the Chinese this is from 2022 too. Chinese fertility rate, 2020. Oh, Chinese is actually pretty low. It's 1.2. It's lower than Japan.
2.1 is fine as a global fertility rate.
No, that's fine. That's absolutely like that's actually kind of what you probably want.
That's like optimal.
But it's really unequal, right? Like where it's at. The richer places have the lowest fertility rates right now. The lowest fertility rates are.
It's like Eastern Europe.
Yeah, it's real low in Eastern Europe and Korea. Where's it real high at? Let's see. Rwanda and Zambia, Africa, India, some parts of Latin America, although it's declining fast. It's declining fast in India too. The lowest are
Korea is the lowest.
Yeah, it's Korea, and then it's like Poland and Russia and Latvia and Bulgaria and China, and then the Middle East is declining a lot too, actually. The richer parts of it, Qatar and Saudi Arabia is pretty low.
I mean, reducing it to 2.2 is fine if you ask me. Like, people need to stop freaking out, and then let people from Africa into your rich countries. I'm all for open borders. See, Derick Varn, like let's give them some open borders. Let's have a visa system or something.
Well, yeah, but I mean, ooh boy. I am also for relatively open borders. I will also say, historically speaking, communist countries didn't have relatively open borders.
Mm-hmm.
However, Marx did say that that opting for closed borders in a capitalist country is pitting one proletariat against another, and it's dumb. But he also said that there is some truth. I mean, Marx also thought there is some truth that having to like a whole lot of labor would increase labor competition. But he also talked about how it trained people to work together and they influence each other. It's
Melting
not.
pot, baby.
It's not. I mean, the Mark. I actually did, I have a show coming up. What Marx actually said about immigration. He didn't say much at all
Because it wasn't a fucking immigration system back in those days.
No, but he talked about it specifically in the Irish and British context, and he kind of like his thoughts on it would make both liberals and conservatives on the issues very mad. I am for relatively open borders too.
I mean, let people travel. Let people
yeah.
move. I mean, like, I don't think it's worth like having an unregulated border system, because that just opens up to smuggling. But if you have like a good, easy visa system, it would work. What are the borders of Israel going to be in 2028? Who knows?
Who knows?
Roll a dice, roll a dice. D10, Golan Heights. I mean, they're quite far into Syria at the moment.
What does that mean?
Attacking
for development in Africa? Brain drain benefits imperial core. No, I mean, which imperial core? Because a lot of the Africans are going to try to be heading to China, not the U.S. But
who gets a country first? Kurds or Palestinians get a country before Kurds do? No doubt, because there's Palestine's already recognized by a load of countries as a country.
Yeah. Also, it doesn't cause as many problems for as many different countries as Kurdistan.
Exactly. Does. Like everybody wants. Only Israel doesn't want a Palestine. It's like everybody, even the Americans deep down want a Palestine. The Koch brothers, not Koch brothers. Koch brother. One of them died. Koch brothers support U.S. chamber. Yeah, but like just because they support it doesn't mean you don't have to support it. Like, if the Koch brothers said we should have like due process and freedom of speech, would you be against that?
Probably.
I don't think. Man, I mean, I just this is a weird thing that people always want to be like, say, well, these people like this thing. It's like they might like that thing, but they might like it for the wrong reasons, right? Like, for example, you might have an anti-Semite who wants like a one-state solution for Israel-Palestine, not because he wants justice for the Palestinians, because he wants to exterminate the Jews, which I think is like pretty. Not a good reason for wanting to do it, but the idea of having a single democratic state might be a nice idea. Who knows? No borders, no nations. Although I don't think, under capitalism, I don't think it's feasible to have fully open borders. I think that's one of the problems liberals have talking about immigration. There's something. It gives them the ick. I believe that's what the kids say these days. It gives them the ick. For a conservative that believes in hierarchies of race and citizenship and whatever, it's not like it's not a difficult pull to kind of say, like, let's keep these people out. But if you're a liberal who at least on the surface believes in the kind of universality of human dignity and rights, then like it seems extremely arbitrary to exclude people from your country. Even
Nations
though
will always exist independent of borders and states. That's funny. Do you believe that because there are languages that there will always be nations? Is this the equivocation of nation game, where sometimes you mean civic ethnicity and sometimes you mean racial ethnicity, as if those things are stable, as if they ever have been stable?
Yeah, they change over time.
Yeah, there'd be ethnic groupings, absolutely, but they've changed. They change a lot. Go ahead, Djene.
No, I'm just reading some of the comments. The best visa system in the world won't be able to address the problem of the poorest running to countries that have subject to forms of problems. That's true. Don't know how you deal with it, but you can't deal with it. And that's why liberals have a hard time, because they're like, they have this belief that everyone is. I mean, I was talking to Toure Reed the other day. We were having a chat, and he made the point that like racism is required for liberalism because it's required to justify why people are excluded from the universality of humanity. And I think
go ahead.
Go ahead. You go ahead.
No, I mean racism is required for liberalism because you have to exclude somebody. China mass migration out of Africa means less development. No, not necessarily. I mean, you're assuming that a place with resources will organically always develop it on their own, regardless of how smart it is. And I hate to tell you, but China tried that, and all of you are dungus now for a reason.
I mean, you get what's his name? People send money back home too. Like, if you go to Kurdistan today, loads of people in Iraqi Kurdistan, they've spent like 10, 15, 20 years in the UK. They made money, went back to Kurdistan, set up businesses and do their own thing. She's popular in the... What? My conservative boss has a VMAD about Nuri performing... A VMAD about Nuri performing well on the gospel music charts. Is she... I don't know. Is she popular in the Kurdish diaspora? I don't know. Maybe.
How can you ever build a strong labor unions in a generous welfare state with open borders? Well, you can't build it with closed borders.
That's it. But that's a fair point, right? That is a fair point. That's one of the contradictions. Like, you want this universalist welfare state, but at the same time, you have to, to maintain it, you have to be a bit exclusionary.
You have to be a bit exclusionary. However, if the more exclusionary you are, once you drop your growth rate, so you don't have the capitalist profits to maintain the welfare states off of commodity production, which we have seen over and over again. I mean, I don't want to tell you guys to learn economics, but fucking learn economics. Like
it works for a bit until it doesn't.
Right. Like, there's a reason why you don't see like stable, static welfare states in a capitalist world system. Like, they don't tend to stay stable. Because you're kind of damned either way. You open up your border, you're going to be flooded, right? Yes, absolutely. But if you completely close it off,
you end up like Korea and have like 0.8 fertility, and you won't be able to,
workers.
Like, no workers. Yeah,
and having to outsource like most of your production elsewhere. Okay, so a lot of you are just nationalists. It's good to know.
Nationalism, socialism in one country, baby. I'm all about that.
Everyone's going to double down on nation states when nation states are the least viable, which is what I've been saying now for 20 fucking years.
Socialism in Luxembourg. Can Luxembourg build socialism?
Imagine trying to organize socialism while trying to build socialist movement. Good luck with that. Well, I mean, that's what everyone's tried to do, right? Has it ever worked?
I think I'm just going to become a conservative, Varn. A real conservative, not like these fakos these days. No, like just be like an FDR conservative. It's the best we can do. I'll end up like Saga and what's his surname? Engetti?
Yeah.
Do you think I could, pretend to be one of these Indians and get in on the act? I mean, there's quite a few Middle Eastern orientated people, I suppose, lurking around. They're just not as good as the Indians. They're just the pros, just the pros. They really know how to like grift the white man. The white man deserves it. Become a federalist. Okay, imagine trying to organize a socialism while simultaneously advocating for open borders. Good luck with that. I mean, and try doing it with advocating it for closed borders as well. It's not going to work either.
You want international competition and trying to run a socialist state in an autarky, you won't exist very long. We already know that for a fact.
Dugan civilization state or state network state. Oh God, yes, network states. Nothing's feasible. No, we're all doomed. Nah, I don't think we're all doomed. Some of us are, though. Some people are more doomed than others. Indian Gene Cumtown. I would totally do. I mean, like, I should have been on Cumtown. I should have been a co-host on Cumtown. I feel like that was my true vocation in life.
Balaji's
the guy who wrote The Network State. It's that weird book about how like they have to have all these like, I don't know, like corporate run enclaves inside nation state. They basically, I think they all played Cyberpunk 2025 when they were teenagers and were like, Night City is awesome. You know what another really good 90s cyberpunk is? Phantom 20. What is it? 2029 or something? I can't remember. I'm gonna look it up. Phantom 20. You know the Phantom, the superhero?
Mm-hmm.
There was like a 90s cartoon. Was it Phantom 22? Cartoon. I forget what it was called. It was one of the best.
I'm very fascinated by people who want closed borders welfare state, but also want to collapse the stock market and also want a welfare state that's trying to build socialism, but also trying to collapse all the core. It doesn't make any fucking sense, guys. I hate to tell you, it doesn't.
Well, it's a damned if you do and you damned if you don't, right? You need
right. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's just. Well, yes, they do have to articulate a policy, and they're not. Like, it's always like abolish ICE, but not talk about how you would actually have a.
how would you enforce the border?
How would you enforce the border? How do you
Phantom
control
2040.
capital, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Phantom 2040. That's the cartoon I'm talking about. Great cyberpunk. But yeah, that's what like network cities, baby. Space Ghost and the Tick, that's okay. How do they plan to do it? Open borders. I just, like there's a lot of people like Sarah Wagner in Germany tried to do the whole conservative, socially conservative
Marxism thing.
Marxism thing. It didn't work.
It doesn't work anywhere because neither side trusts you.
Yeah, they don't trust you.
It didn't work with Galway either. Like,
yeah, it just doesn't work. It's like you can nobody trusts you. You lose the bohemian left, and you might gain a few proles, but like really, most of them will just go conservative. I just don't think it's a viable political project. That's not to say like ultra bohemianism is going to win, but
can you possibly get support of the workers while advocating open borders? Please describe. Well, go read Marx. You keep on talking about Marx, and you clearly haven't read what he wrote on immigration because he talks about that issue explicitly, and you are literally making the arguments that he mocked. So,
yeah, I mean, Bruce Campbell almost got that role. He would have been good as the Phantom. I like the Phantom. He's a good superhero. It's a bit weird though. In Phantom 2040, there's like a jungle underneath the cyberpunk city. Oh, Ron Perlman is the bad guy.
He did upside both sides of the immigration issue because he does say that immigration does lower wages in mass amounts. He also said that it builds international solidarity amongst the working class in ways that make socialism more possible. Both things are simultaneously true, and they're both limits.
The limits.
Like when people tell you that people aren't hurt by mass immigration if you are on, depending on what sector is being immigrated into, they are probably not telling the truth.
Probably.
But I also think if you think you're going to close the borders down and lock everything down, and before you have like anything else, the people who are going to benefit from that probably also aren't going to be workers, period. Particularly because international supply chains will always be and have been even before capitalism multinational. Now, I would. Oh, I know Sid Nanda. Anyway, I would say one of the things that we are saying here is that in a capitalist society, you cannot have a completely unregulated border because you can't have completely unregulated trade. And capitalists know that. I mean, despite what they say about it, it's always about like leveraging somebody against another in trade competition. Now, when you're saying like, because you keep on talking like we're advocating for like totally open, non-regulated borders, what we'd advocated was a simplification of a visa system. Like if I was going to do it right now in the U.S., I'd be advocating for a simplified visa system where people who get hired can come in as long as they're coming in at the same wages and aren't used to undercut the market.
Simple.
Like, but you're right. One of the reasons why you don't see liberals like arguing for a totally legalized market is they want sub minimum wage wages. That's also why they're not doing that much to stop child labor, which is also about sub minimum wage wages. Capitalists don't want regulations until they lose money. Actually, capitalists historically like regulations depending on where in the capitalist system they're at.
Yeah, Facebook wanted some regulations because they thought they were the only ones who could comply, so they would crush their competition.
Right. Well, I would say open borders versus closed borders. It's a very confused thing because, like, open borders means people can go, people can come and go. Assume within, with relative ease if they have, national. But what you don't want is like the imperial core, whatever happens to be the imperial core at that at a given time, shutting down when it doesn't have enough workers and is falling apart from lack of labor, and also at the same time having massive amounts of people dying on your border for no fucking reason. And the elephant in the room that we're not talking about is the fact that some of this is doing the climate change policy that hits the places that didn't do the climate change harder than the places that did do the climate change because of where they are geographically. That is something we have to deal with.
Grim. Man, it's midnight here. I need to
go to bed.
So fare thee well, Varnonauts. Enjoy your evening. Pleasure yourselves. Think about what I've told you about certain groups monopolizing political forces in the United States. And fare thee well.
Oh man, good night, Gene. Don't start talking about the DQ. Keeping poor countries poor and poaching their educated and skilled workers is not a leftist position. It shouldn't be, no. But the thing is, you also have to develop them internally. Like talking about this, like that people are just going to develop completely on their own when resources are already curtailed from them because of geographical location is just not a realistic way to think about it. All right. Peter Turchin right and wrong in that society overproduces elites, but these elites are incompetent, even military ones, because of the scale of the institutions they're participating in. I think Peter Turchin is about half right. I do think we have overproduction of certain kinds of fields because we can't rationally allocate them. Well, I mean, we guys keep on talking about like what would be ideal for any capitalist nation. I can't think of a capitalist nation that has restricted labor and also has declining birth rates. And one of the things is in a capitalist nation, as you develop, your cost of support goes up, and so your birth rates decline. That we've seen it over and over and over and over and over again. I don't like answering questions about how I feel about specific people that I actually happen to have met. I met Dave. Feels like a way to completely my feeling in a nutshell is I do not agree with all their theoretical takes. I do not watch them enough to go down the thing, but I wouldn't have, for example, been dying on the hill to cancel or support Nina Powers, for example. I just don't see why I would care about that one way or the other. But I get tired of these parasocial beasts, man. I really do. I mean, like, you guys seem addicted to them. It's like rat beef bullshit. A serious question? What do you think about the seething contempt Democrats, mainly the party and many voters, seem to have for rural Americans? Well, they're fucked as long as they continue doing that. They live in a federated country. Any thoughts on Syria? Syria's a mess. like, I my unpopular position on Syria is there's not a side that could have come to power that I would have liked, but the West should have left it alone. Which is, I know that is what, but I mean, like, Syria was a pincushion for the bombs of the world from almost all sides for 10 fucking years. It's one of the most depressing things I can think about. And if you look at like how many people have died in that conflict, it's astounding. But I don't think we should have been there. Maybe this is this like little bit of paleo conservatism left in me or whatever, but I tend to think US military interventionism is usually bad, okay? Have I ever in my life flirted with the politics of foreign intervention? That's a good question. When I was a teenager, I was really torn about what was going on in former Yugoslavia. Um, um, Usually, U.S. intervention does not lead to that country's civil society. The exceptions were after World War II and under Marshall Plan Fordism. And even then, I don't want to get too happy about that. Historically, that's the basis of the U.S. being able to assume the British Empire. How would a socialist or even a progressive movement build power based in rural areas? Just cool. I mean, one is to have a sensible rural policy. I mean, this is one of the things where, like, I personally am not a Dungist, but Mao during the collective period was very good at keeping the peasants on board, whereas Stalin during collective period was not. So how Mao did that was empowering local communities a whole lot, even though there was common ownership of land, and trying to get people from the cities to go out into the countryside and exchange skills. Rustification wasn't just a punishment for elites, even though it's perceived by elites as that. It was a way for people to be skilled across the board. So Cossack supremacist. God, you guys are so fucking wild. Yeah. Yeah, you do need land reform, but you also do have to be careful with ranchers and pastoralists in general. That's not just a problem of like American ranchers, that's a problem with pastoralists. The skilled at creating famines. Yeah, actually, Ingalls did argue for the compensation of landowners. Yes, he did. Do small business co-ops render their workers petty bourgeois? That they're kind of in a double position, just like if you have stocks in a 401k, you're in a double position. She does speak pretty positively of being sent to a cave on a roll farm. In fact, she one of the things that I really respect G for, and I don't always sing G's praises. I'm not always super sanguine on everything China does, but I do respect Xi for this. He reversed a lot of the policies that were really detrimental to the countryside under Deng and Jimin that Hu Jintao promised to reverse but didn't. Xi actually did. Ranchers are usually the ranchers the ranchers are pastoralists are the basis of aristocrats in most societies that have them. I also think the abolition of town and country is something socialists need to think about a whole lot more because it is part of the socialist program and we haven't thought about it in like 150 years. The Soviet Union kind of gave up on it for reasons of that I'm not even going to say we're totally illogical. I mean, like they were worried about rural development and feeding their population. So you can't be super mad about them, but it's a big problem. Like the rural urban divide predates modern politics. It even predates the right left divide. You're not banned, Dig Dug. I guess what's nuts about Mao is he kept the support of many peasants after starving them with that rural furnace nonsense. Yeah, but after the Great Leap Forward, average lifespan in China continued to go up by leaps and bounds until the 1980s, where it stalled out. It started picking back up again in the late aughts. But I mean, like the average lifespan in China between the Boxer Rebellion and the establishment of the of the PRC was actually pretty low. It even went up technically during the Great Leap Forward, which is kind of amazing. But we have to factor in how many civil wars and stuff there were in China between, like after the fall of, after the Opium Wars. I mean, like the Boxer Rebellion is one of the, we call it a rebellion, but I mean, more people died on it in orders of magnitude larger than what happened in the U.S. Civil War. And the U.S. Civil War is the bloodiest war in U.S. history per capita. So when people talk about Chinese history, they're often looking at numbers in isolation. They're not looking at numbers over time and the context for those numbers, but that's true for most things. How would Russian victory in Ukraine be hollow our last gasp? Oof. I'm not touching that one. Was the Boxer Rebellion regional in a way at all similar to the U.S. Civil War? Kind of. I mean, it's more complicated than that because there's multiple factions going on there. But yeah, but it was way more bloody. My one tanky bugbear is that I'm a Great Leap Forward death toll true for Western scholars calculate pretty much solely from both rates. I actually have had some Chinese scholars on that. I think the Great Leap Forward was bad, but I think its death toll is overstated if you look at the average lifespan increase during the period. BSS would be a fine model for building socialists, anti-capitalist, culturally conservative. Y'all are afraid. You know that? That's what you are. You're afraid. These are the kinds of things people who are afraid say. Do you think you need to be culturally conservative and that's going to save you? That's pretty funny. What does that even fucking mean? Because I don't know. It changes every fucking week. Just fell short of a seat. Her party didn't do shit, Sean. Well, I'm being quiet because I find reading this to be demoralizing. So I'll see you guys later. Have a good night. Protect your peace. And no, the Black Book of Communism is overstated. Have a good day.